The following program will make you want to grow things and experience new and wonderful dreams about your plants, garden, and garden design. Listener participation is always strongly advised. And welcome to Down the Garden Path with your hosts Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101. To get on board right now, send us an email. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, right to your hosts of Down the Garden Path, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing.
Hello and welcome everyone to this episode of Down the Garden Path, where we discuss down-to-earth tips and advice for your plants, gardens, and landscapes. As landscape designers and gardeners, we think it is important and possible to have great landscapes that are low maintenance, and we want to help you make it happen. I am Joanne Shaw, landscape designer and owner of Down-to-Earth Landscape Design, and I've been designing beautiful landscapes for homeowners east of Toronto for over a decade. With me across Zoom, once again, is my co-host Matthew Dressing. Welcome, Matthew.
Welcome, Joanne. Good evening, everyone. I am Matthew Dressing, horticulturist and landscape designer, and owner of Natural Affinity Garden Design. Natural Affinity is a landscape garden and maintenance firm servicing Toronto and the Eastern GTA. Joanne and I enjoy hosting Down the Garden Path each week, bringing you interesting, relevant, and helpful topics to help you achieve a great garden. We learn right along with you from each other, from our research, and from the guests that join us here on the show. As always, we welcome your questions via social media, email, or phone call.
And we want to thank everybody who's joining us live here on Down the Garden Path. And you can also check out past shows of Down the Garden Path on your favorite podcast app. We've got lots of great content there. And while you're there, please subscribe so that you will be notified of new content. That's right, Matt.
That's right.
We like welcoming new listeners.
Always. And we love to hear from where you're from. So when you write us, always let us know.
That's right.
Well, we've reached the end of November here on Down the Garden Path. And this month, we've been talking garden authors. However, tonight we're going to take a step back into October's month of our environmental impact, as we are excited to have the chance to discuss solar power with Ray Jarvis of Solar Direct Canada. Want to join the conversation? Perhaps you'd like to ask Ray a question or have a question about solar power, or would like to share a solar power experience. We'd love to hear from you. Write us here in studio at instudio101@gmail.com.
That's right. And so here's a little bit about Ray as before he joins the show. Ray is the founder and owner of Solar Direct Canada. SDC has installed in excess of 500 solar projects in Southern Ontario and continues to sell and service systems today. He lives in Acton, Ontario with his wife, son, and daughter. Welcome to the show, Ray.
Welcome, Ray.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Matt. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, why don't we start off with you telling a bit more about yourself and how you got into solar?
Well, we got into solar almost 30 years ago, but we really kind of took off big about 10 years ago when the Ontario microfit program came along. So we've been installing, we installed about 500 systems under the microfit program. We've installed quite a few others in off-grid environments. Prior to 10 years ago, what we were doing was primarily off-grid and very small systems. But as I say, when the microfit came along, we expanded into the grid tie system, and we've been doing that ever since. Now, microfit ended a couple of years ago, so we transitioned into net metering, and we're still doing that today.
So what is microfit?
Well, microfit is part of the feed-in tariff program. So FIT stands for feed-in tariff. There was microfit, small fit, and large fit. So microfit was where you would install solar panels on your roof, and the government would give you a contract for 20 years at a guaranteed rate. And it started off at a very high rate. It started off at 80 cents a kilowatt hour. So anywhere from $10,000 to $16,000 a year you'd receive from the government for putting solar on your roof. That's for a 20-year contract. And then it's got slowly phased down as low as 29 cents, and then they phased the whole thing out. But during that time, there was about 20,000 installs done in Ontario. A lot of farmers, if you drive through, farm country, you'll see these kind of self-standing arrays. Those are all generally under microfit. And you see them on rooftops and stuff like that. So, well, I said there are almost 20,000 of them in Ontario, so quite a few.
Now, are they still running then, even though the program ended? Okay.
The program still ended, but the contracts were for 20 years. So it started in 2010. So those contracts still have another 10 years to run. And then the recent ones, they have another, I guess, 13 to 14 years left. So, yep, those are still going.
Oh, that's good. Excellent. And now you said they transitioned from from the microfit to something else. Oh, net metering.
Yeah, so net metering is generally, even when microfit was around, people would call us up and say, I want to generate power. I want to generate my own power from solar. And at that time, we'd always talk about the microfit because it was a better deal. But now that microfit's gone, net metering is a great choice for people that want to go, that want to generate their power from solar. So net metering is you basically put the, I'm sorry, I muted that. Yeah, so this is as simple as you put the power, you put the solar panels on your roof, you generate the power, and the power is fed directly into your load center, into your fuse box. So the trick with net metering though is that if you generate more power than you're using, like you would on a sunny day, that power
in July, right?
Sunny, well, even in a sunny day in November, you could be generating, 2 or 3 times what your house is using in the middle of the day. And that power flows backward through the grid. They won't pay you for it, but they store it for you for free. So, well, today wasn't a good example, but see, yesterday you would have generated more power than you would have used, and then in the evening you would have drawn that out for free. So it allows you to be in Ontario, where our climate changes so much from July to December. We need a way to be able to store that energy, and storing it in a battery is just not practical. You can't store it for 6 months in a battery. So the grid is essentially your unlimited battery. It's free and it's unlimited. So we can store, tens of thousands of kilowatt hours if we wish, from July to, a season like this. So.
Wow. Okay. That really makes sense. So are you seeing like the price to install it, or is it, because there must be a reason that everybody doesn't have it on their roof, right? So.
Well, that's unfortunately one of the things that's working against us right now is the Ontario Fair Hydro Act. This came in at the end of the Kathleen win. There's a bit of a vote buying exercise that she did by reducing everyone's hydro bill by 30%.
Okay.
So that sounds great, but it's not like she found a way to generate power cheaper. All they did was they borrowed money and they paid down people's hydro bills, and they're still doing that today. So we're competing against a subsidized market. So the hydro bill you have today, everyone thinks their hydro bill is high, but if you look on your bill somewhere on there, it'll say that you save this much money because of the Ontario Fair Hydro Act. So we're accumulating billions of dollars of debt in order to have this program, and it really works counter to conservation efforts, and it works counter to any renewable energy, because, as I say, we have no problem competing on a level playing field, but all of our competitors are now subsidized to the tune of 30%. Now that's not to say it's not a good deal. It's still worthwhile doing. You can get all your energy from solar, from renewable sources, and it doesn't cost more. It's not cheaper, but it doesn't cost more. Before, it was cheaper, and under the microfit program, you actually earned money. So you would typically earn 10 to 14% on your money. Now the return on investment for net metering is, in this low single digits. That'll change as soon as the Ontario Fair Hydro Act goes away, but I don't think that's going away as long as the present government is in place.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay.
So where does someone start if they are really interested in getting into solar power? Where does someone start to look? How would you recommend getting involved?
Getting involved in getting one installed, or
Yeah, like just anyone's maybe they want to get it installed in their house or they just want to learn more about it. If,
well, that's
where
where
does the
most.
journey begin?
Well, typically someone will contact us, and we'll go over some of the basics on the phone. And the starting point for us is generally how many kilowatt hours that they use per year. And we'll take a look at the rooftop. We'll see how viable the rooftop is. There are some rooftops that just don't work. They're surrounded by trees, or they're, that sort of thing. And then we'll we'll design a system that will generate the same amount of kilowatt hours that they plan to use. So if they're using 12,000 kilowatt hours a year, we'll design a system that will generate 12,000 kilowatt hours a year, and then we'll present them with the numbers, and it's up to them whether it makes sense to them or not.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, like a typical system, a typical household in Ontario uses 10,000 to 15,000 kilowatt hours per year. And a 10 kilowatt system will generally, depending on their roof and a couple other things, will generally work. So a 10 kilowatt system is roughly $28,000, something like that. So that system, let's call it 30,000 to make things easy. If you look at the cost of capital on $30,000, that's $600 a year, and it saves $1,500 a year in hydro bills. So it seems like a good it seems like a good deal, but some people look at it as, okay, well, I'm going to take 10, 15 years to pay this off, and the return on investment isn't good enough for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, there's probably only about 3 to 5% of people that do it because it's green. They're not interested in the return on investment. Almost everyone's interested in something that's return on investment. Mm-hmm. They all want to help the climate. They all want to do their part, but they don't want to spend any money to do it.
Yeah.
Or they want to be paid to do it, basically. So.
Yeah, that sounds like that net or the microfit was a good deal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And microfit was necessary because in Ontario 10 years ago, solar was nowhere. People hadn't heard of solar. No one had seen it. So when you approach someone and said, hey, do you want to put solar on your rooftop, and the government's going to pay you, I got a lot of looks saying, well, sure, they're going to pay me. They're not going to pay me. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. And that's why they had it at such a high rate. They had to offer a rate that was something to get people interested in. And it did what it was supposed to do. It created an industry in Ontario, and it created a lot of interest in it. And a lot of people we were criticized because of the rates the government offered us, but there was reasons for it back then. And
yeah, I feel like I see it more. I see solar panels on homes more.
Well, like I said, there was 20,000. At least 20,000 installed in a short period of time. In the past 5 years, it's dropped off dramatically, just because of, say, the Ontario Fair Hydro Act, and the net metering was a harder sell too. But yeah, no, there's a lot of them around, and there's a lot more that you don't see. So if you go onto something like Google Earth and you look around, maybe north of Barrie or something like that, you'll see fields and fields of solar panels that you can't see from the road. Because one of the requirements that we have when we're installing a solar field is we have to put shielding around it, so it has to be invisible to people around it, because they consider them so ugly, I guess. They don't mind putting these big hydro towers 100 feet in the air, but solar's too ugly to look at. So there's a lot of them. They're just over the fence, and you don't know they're there because we've had to put berms up and trees up and stuff like that, so they're not visible. But from Google Earth, there's a lot of them around.
Yeah.
What
Interesting.
about visibility from like something like a highway? I just think as I go, I have a sister who lives in Belleville. As I go there, we always pass a solar field. And I don't know, is that more private or What's the difference there?
Well, the rules changed halfway through. So in the very beginning, we didn't have to do that. So if it was a contract that was approved earlier on, there's multiple versions of the contract. So the earlier versions of the contract didn't include provisions for shielding them. That was later on. So it might be that you're looking at an older version of them. That's all.
One of the
Wow.
earlier ones. Interesting. So I just have a question. So Bart's written in. Bart says, "Hello. What does it actually mean to be off the grid?" He has in quotes. Does that mean just not using municipal electricity? Are we actually disconnected from that source? Will solar power give us enough electricity to run a medium-sized home 24/7, 365? Thank you, Bart.
So that's one of those questions that yes and no. Yes, absolutely. We can design a system that will take a full size system, a full size house completely off the grid. It's not cost effective though. I'm not sure what area the person's calling from, but here in Ontario we have a very varied climate. Of course, in the summer we get tons of solar radiation, and in November, December, we get almost none. So anyone who's off grid needs an alternative source. So any off grid installation we do where someone's there 365, we have to put in generators. And this month here, they'll have a generator running for hours of, 3 or 4 hours a day to charge up their batteries. So it absolutely can be done. I think where it's mostly practical is for seasonal installations, places that are like on an island in Georgian Bay. We've done a lot of those.
Yeah, like cottage country, that type of thing, right?
Or if you're someplace where you're at a hunt camp or something where you got to drive 10 kilometers down an ATV trail, and Hydro One wants, $60,000 to bring the power in. And it's a seasonal installation. That's the most practical application. But we have plenty of people that live off grid, 12 months out of the year in Ontario. And some of them are by choice, and some of them are because, once again, Hydro One just wanted too much money. We've got an installation down here in Milton, and it's a brand new modern house, large house, and they're 100% off grid just because he wanted to do that. He was a bit of a prepper, and he had the big bunkers in the basement and all the rest of that.
Yeah.
But it was a very expensive installation. It was about $75,000-$80,000 to take him off grid. And he had a connection that was, 300 feet away. He just chose not to. He had the money and wanted to do that. So absolutely, you can do it. But if you have any connection to the grid, it's probably the better way to go, and just do net metering.
Interesting. You mentioned that you'd have to set up generators. Is it possible to gather the solar energy during a day and store it in like a battery, like overnight, or for a short amount of time?
Oh, absolutely. But if we look at a day like today, we didn't get much. And in this time of year, we could go 2 weeks without getting much.
That's
true. A 10 kilowatt array in the summertime could generate 100 kilowatt hours. So just to back up for that perspective, the average home uses between 20 and 35 kilowatt hours a day. So in the summer, you can generate 100 kilowatt hours, but you wouldn't be able to use it. And then today, like on a day like today, I could check some of my systems, but we probably generated 3 kilowatt hours today, or 4 kilowatt hours. So you're going to have to, this time of year, you have to use a generator.
But can't you pull from because you said you have excess in July, so can't we use that July now?
Well,
am I oversimplifying?
If we're net metering, we could do that. Or if we had a gigantic battery, we could do that too. But batteries are anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a kilowatt hour. So if you want to store 30 kilowatt hours, then you could be looking at $30,000 to store that 30 kilowatt hours. So it's not practical to store 1,000 kilowatt hours or anything like that.
Right.
Seasonal. But yeah, net metering, absolutely. That's how you.
Okay, so that off-grid thing, that's why you can't do it, because you're really off the grid.
You're absolutely off the grid. So you're on your own, which is what most of them are looking for. They want to be completely on their own.
Yes.
Like I said, this gentleman was a bit of a prepper, and that's what he wanted, and he had the money to do it. So here we go. We'll build it for you.
Yeah, definitly. So. And I know when we see those cottages in the middle of an island, you're always wondering, how do they have internet? But so yeah. Matt, we've got another question.
We do. So Janice has written in, what happens on a cloudy or no sun days that may happen for a while. But the system still generate electricity? Does it store electricity for those rainy days? If so, for how long? I understand that there can be a backup to the city power grid, but what about people wanting to be totally off the grid? What would happen with no sun days for a week straight or something like that? Thank you.
Oh, I think we kind of answered that.
I think we kind of
Yeah.
answered it as we go in, but maybe
Yeah.
just quickly for.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in there.
Yeah.
But even on a day like today, which here in Ontario was very overcast and rainy, we'll still generate power. But a 10 kilowatt system might generate 300 watts. So it's running at like 3% capacity.
Hmm.
Um, so it's not enough in order. So you would have to have some supplement, like I said, a generator or such.
Yeah.
Um, so
If you're off the grid, but if
if
you're
you're
net
off the grid,
metering, then it's okay because you're borrowing from July kind of thing.
yeah, and with net metering, you don't have to generate 100% of your power anyway. So that's what net metering means. You pay the net difference. So if you generate 12,000 kilowatt hours a year and you happen to use 13,000 kilowatt hours, you just pay the net difference. You pay for 1,000 kilowatt hours.
Okay.
So it's not an all or nothing thing. And we do have some people that they don't want to generate all of it through solar. They only have a budget or whatever, and or they're planning on downsizing in the future, so they don't want to build a system that's too big for the future, because these
Yeah.
systems are lifespan of 20 to 30 years. So you don't want, if all your kids are about to move out and stuff like that, you don't want
Mhm.
to build this great big system and then not have a use for the power. So
Right. Would do you have any statistics on like do they add to the resale of a home? Like if a home has done it and the homeowners have lived there for 15 years and put it up for sale, like is that seen as a benefit or I
that's
guess it
a
depends.
really good question, and we are, as I said, the first large systems in Ontario we started installing were 10 years ago. We are
Okay.
starting to see those resales. We don't see a lot of them because people that were going to that put the investment in to put a solar system, most of them weren't planning on moving in the next little while. So
Right.
we don't have a lot of overturning, but we're seeing more of it now. Like I said, 10 years later. So what we're seeing now is systems that are being sold with microfit systems on the roof, and they're a lot easier to understand, because if you have a microfit system on the roof that's generating $10,000 a year, people see value in that.
Hmm.
And that's a very easy thing to quantify. Okay, I've got 10 years left of this X number of dollars, and you can just put it into a spreadsheet and come out with what the thing's worth, the same as you would an annuity or a bond or something like that. So that's a little easier. When it comes to net metering, we haven't seen. I'm not sure if we've seen a lot of them change hands yet.
Okay.
But it's that can be challenging though, because it really takes, you have to educate the real estate agents, because
Hmm.
sometimes the real estate agents just don't. And we've
Yeah.
gone out and we've given seminars to real estate agencies and stuff like that, so they can understand what's actually going on,
Hmm.
because that is kind of hit and miss though. It's a very good question.
Yeah.
And I
I could
think,
see that though. I could see that it's too young yet. But I think it would be, especially for the younger generation who are, I think, a little bit more open-minded.
this funny thing is, when we started selling solar, we actually thought we'd be getting the younger generation, we'd be getting the tree huggers and that sort of thing, but we didn't. Most of our
Because the tree
customers,
huggers are poor, Ray. The tree huggers are.
maybe, but
Yeah.
what we found was that most of our customers were either in retirement or approaching retirement. So our average customer was probably somewhere in the 65 years old.
Wow.
We had some that were, in the 40s and stuff. We had some in the 90s, but the average customer was someone who was approaching retirement, and they wanted to fix their costs so they can pay this one price, and they'll have their hydro paid for the rest of their lives. Next 20, 30 years, their hydro is paid for. So people that are looking for fixed, like I guess fixed expenses, or eliminating their expenses completely.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting thing though. I thought we'd get more of the younger people, more progressive and open-minded, as you said, but no, it was the older people that embraced solar more than anything.
I
So,
could see the younger people appreciating that the work's already being done. Like, it's already there, as opposed to them like researching it and paying the money, right, to make it happen. So I think there's some benefit. I think we'll have to see when the market starts changing. But yeah.
but yeah, it has been very hit and miss. There's some people that have done very well with them, and other people is like, okay, well, I want them taken off. And
Oh, okay.
so
Now, if you do that, can you reuse the panels?
you can, but you wouldn't want to do it with a microfit system, because the microfit system, you can't take the contract somewhere else. The contract
Oh,
is bound to that one structure, so it can
okay.
be transferred between owners, but you can't take it. You can't take the contract with you, and that's where the value is in those older systems.
Okay.
And those older systems, even though a new system is only $30,000, those older systems are worth double that today because of the contract, not because of the equipment.
Right.
So.
And the equipment, like how much do you, because it said in your bio says that you still install and service them. So is it a high maintenance system? Is it?
Not really. The most common service we get, service request we get, is to take the panels off and put them back on when someone re-roofs. So one of the things we try to, we try to get people to do prior to putting solar panels on is make sure the roof is in good condition. But as I say, we are seeing systems that are 10 years old now. So 10 years later, they want to redo their roof. So that's our most common thing, is to go take the panels off. The roofer comes in, they re-roof, and then we go back, put the panels on. So that's the majority of what we're doing today. There's, occasionally we get service calls with dual axis trackers. Dual axis trackers are those things that move and follow and track the sun. So there are mechanical motors and actuators and things in that, and we do get calls on that sort of thing too. So, but as far as the solar panels go, they're all solid state. They sit there. They don't do anything. There's no maintenance required on them. Yeah, they're very, very good that way.
Excellent.
I'm going to jump in just as we have people tuning in and joining us live all the time. So if you are just joining us, thank you for tuning in to Down the Garden Path here in Reality Radio 101.com. We are here talking solar power with Ray Jarvis of Solar Direct Canada. So make sure to take a look at everything Ray is doing, and you can find him at www.solardirectcanada.com. Also, don't forget to write us in with your solar power questions or your energy questions for Ray to answer. You can write us here in studio 101 at gmail.com. And we do have a couple of listener questions. Swanee's written in and she says, hello, what is net metering and how will that save me money? Thank you.
So net metering, we've mentioned this a couple of times before, but net metering is where you purchase solar panels, you have them put on your roof. They generate power. The power goes directly into your load center, goes directly to the household's loads. And the excess power goes to the grid where you get to store it. So essentially what you're doing is you can generate 100% of the hydro electricity you use per year. So if the average house uses about 12,000 kilowatt hours a year, you can generate all of that. So you can almost eliminate your bill. I wouldn't say completely eliminate your bill, because certain utilities charge administrative charges just to be connected to the grid, billing charges and stuff like that, but they're minimal. You could be paying $20 a month, on a net metering contract, because so they say you're generating all the power. And not only that, but you're now powering your house from renewable energy. You're not using fossil fuels and nuclear and that sort of thing to power your house. If you have an electric car, even better.
That's right.
So thank you, Bonnie, for that question. Frank has also written in, hello tonight. When you install a system, do you deal directly with the electric company currently supplying power to a home, or does your customer have to do this? Is the utility company helpful, or do they give you as installers a hard time? Frank says, I wouldn't want any issues with my electric company supplying power to my home if I decided that solar wasn't for me and I had to go back to the grid. Just a thought. That's all. Right.
And I'm sure Ray doesn't want to get in trouble, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, certainly there's a lot of different utilities out there, and it's not just different utilities, it's different people you deal with. Most of them are quite helpful. Most of them, they have a program and they're supportive. They are, they're very, very, very bureaucratical, but that's what we do. And so, no, the customer doesn't deal with any of that. We offer turnkey services because the forms they want you to fill out are just too complicated, and you'll go back and forth and back and forth. So So as I say, we've done 500 of these, so we have a pretty good idea what we're doing, and we can get the forms through the first time. But no, I wouldn't say there's any animosity from them. It's just there's a process, and you go through it. It's you're dealing with a very bureaucratic organization, and there's no animosity at any level. It's just there's a process, and you have to go through it. If you don't go through it right, we're going to send you through it again.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I don't think there's any issues that way. You're not gonna rub anyone the wrong way because you want to go solar.
Yeah, interesting.
So we've talked about using solar power to power the entire home. Does anybody approach you with other projects? Maybe not the entire home, but the heating of a pool or a smaller system to do something else?
Yeah, no, we get requests like this all the time, anywhere from really small requests. Just the other day, we had a request from the Hydrocut, which is a mountain biking organization, where they wanted to put a humidity monitor out on their trails so they could tell automatically if their trails were muddy or not, so they could open and close the trails. And that's a single panel. It's a very small system, and we get a lot of things like that where it might be to power an IP camera or some kind of
Mm-hmm.
monitoring device, or something where traffic counters and things like that. And yeah, we get other ones where they want to power their hunt camp. That's a very common one. They want to have a way to charge their phones and have their lights on at the hunt camp. And there's other ones we had. It was a university that was conducting a soil study, and we had to build this great big system in the middle of nowhere, so they could monitor something to do with the nitrogen in the soil over the whole year. So
Really
yeah, there's a
well.
bunch of interesting, a bunch of little projects that they come up
Oh,
with,
okay.
and a lot of boats and motorhomes too.
Mm.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Now,
Boats and motorhomes. That's kind of an interesting. So,
Yeah,
because then that would be like a traveling.
yeah. So there's people that do motorhomes where they go to these camps or whatever. But there's also people that want to go out and camp in the middle of the field and for a month or so, and they don't. There's no services there, so that's ideal. They don't have to run a generator. So
So then it's literally solar panels on the motorhome
they're off the grid. Yep.
off the grid.
Yep.
Wow, that is interesting. I think there's got to be an up and coming market for pool heating, because I think with the amount of pools through the pandemic that
Mm.
we're putting in, and the pool market is booming. You think people would be looking for, and I mean, I think those lucky people that have a rectangular pool. I happen to have a really weird shaped kidney pool, and those
Me
solar
too.
blankets, just
Yep.
did not last and did not work for us. So we unfortunately just, keep um, so it would be nice to, I've always said that to my husband, like, we've got all that fence, like, can't we just, do something so that we can heat, the fence faces south and gets all the sun.
Yep. No,
So
absolutely. And that's a very simple application of solar, and it does. It's pretty cost effective. I've got one on my pool. I'm of the same thing. My pool is not rectangular, so that solar blanket didn't last too long because it's such a
yeah,
pain in the butt to put on and take off and take
yeah,
on. So I've got solar on at my house, and it works great. Doesn't cost me any money, of course. There's a couple disadvantages to it. Like if you're having a pool party on the weekend, you can't just go out and crank up the heater and expect it to be warm. If
oh
you
no.
don't get sun, you don't get heat. But it hasn't been a
Oh,
problem. It hasn't been a problem. I
okay.
certainly wouldn't want to have a propane powered heater going, just to heat my pool. That would be kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah. Now,
Yeah.
do you have, where are your panels then? Are your panels like on
On the roof,
they're on of the house
on the
that
house.
heat the pool? Because we also have a lot of people that are installing pools are also installing like gazebos and
Yeah.
covered roofed things, and I think that's just like a natural fit.
It
How
takes a fairly
many like?
large area. It takes a
Oh,
fairly
does
large
it?
area.
Okay.
So I think the statistic is that you should have 30 to 50% of the area of your pool of solar panels. And the panels are different than photovoltaic, of course. They're
Okay.
plastic. I think mine are 4 feet by 12 feet or something like that. So
Oh, okay.
um, yeah, if you like, and you certainly can put them on the ground. I've seen people put them on the ground and put them on angles and stuff like that. You can put them on a fence too. That would work too. So, but
Yeah, that'd mean a lot of fence then. I don't know that that would work. But yeah, no, it's
yeah,
interesting.
every little
People
bit
have
helps.
yeah, for sure. I mean, even if it wasn't, again, if could it still work in that net? Like, even if it didn't cover all of it, it just helped some.
It warms it up a bit. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Carla has written in. Carla says, "Good evening. I live in a very rural area of Canada and I have a ton of squirrels, birds, and raccoons that are all over my home. If I went solar, do these animals affect the system? I've heard of damage and shorting out these panels, etc. Can you please explain some safety or backup measures if this happens? Thank you."
Well, that's a really good question. That's a very good question. And for some reason, in the first couple of years, we never had problems with squirrels or rodents or any of that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, the squirrels realized that they were there because we did start getting into problems with them. And it would happen in the springtime when it was warm underneath the panels, and the squirrels are looking for a place to nest. So they would form nests underneath the panels. And squirrels, they're kind of like beavers, and their teeth always grow, so they just have a constant innate thing to chew, and they'll chew every single little bit of the insulation off a wire. So they changed the rules a number of years ago to address this. So now when we put them on the roof, we're required to put squirrel guard on. So we completely cover the area around the panels with this wire mesh. So that solves that problem. But yeah, it's a good question, and it's something that we didn't, in the first couple of years, we thought, oh, there's no need for this, and they came up with this rule, and all of a sudden, yeah, there's a need for it. So it does happen, and they can absolutely cause damage for sure. So
I could see the raccoons building nests and stuff too, but I don't think they really chew wires much like squirrels do.
no, raccoons and birds, they can make a mess underneath there, but they don't chew.
Okay.
It's just the squirrels. They have to chew.
Yeah, great question though, and great that you're considering it in the country.
Ray, do you have any, situations or places that you've shown up like that and just something absolutely bizarre or unexpected has happened that, like a funny story or experience?
Yeah, definitely. We'll get calls from people, and there's something not working on. You go up on the roof and you look underneath it, and there's two squirrels in it, or sorry, two raccoons right underneath there. I can see them. I know that I can see the problem from here. And yeah, no, definitely. We've gone out there to see that kind of thing, and yeah, you got to chase them out. And with the raccoons, let's say they don't damage the panels, but they can chew through the roof. And they can chew through the rubber boots around the plumbing stacks and stuff like that. So yeah, we've had to go in and clean that sort of thing out too. So yeah, we certainly come across that. Absolutely.
So now you said 30 to 50% of a pool you need to have the solar, cover 30 to 50% of a pool. How many panels would you need to cover a house?
Well, we're doing, you mean for doing solar PV, for doing net metering?
Yes, for net metering.
So, yeah, so net metering, let's say it would depend on how many kilowatt hours you want to generate. And if we take an average of 12,000 kilowatt hours, then we need 10 kilowatts. So a panel is about 300 watts. So we need about 33 panels to go onto a roof. A panel is 18 square feet or 1.66 square meters. So we need, I always tell people about 800 square feet. We don't need 800 square feet, but it's in that kind of range there. So most homes, it'll fit on most homes. The simpler the roofs, the better. Bungalows are easier because they're big, wide areas. You get into the newer subdivisions, and I don't know, the architects go crazy with all these peaks and valleys and gables, and so some of them can be challenging. But we can almost always get 10 kilowatts on a roof. Some are, let's say, some are a lot more challenging than others, but we can generally do it.
Okay.
So speaking of roofs, Gwen has written in, says, "Hi, does it matter which way my house is pointing to get the best possible sunlight? Are the panels movable remotely or automatically movable? Or are they always in a fixed position?"
That's changed a little bit in the last little while. Like when we started doing when the microfit started 10 years ago, panels were really expensive. So we wanted to make sure that the panels were always in the sun and got the best sun. Nowadays, though, panels are cheap. So we'll just put more panels on. So if we don't have an ideal facing roof, if we have an east, west, or even a north facing roof, we'll mount them on that side, and we'll compensate by putting more panels on. So we've got an installation in Whitby where it's a north-south roof. It's a low pitch. It's about 412 pitch, and the panels on the north side, we monitor them because we have panel level monitoring. So the panels on the north side make 78% of what the panels on the south side do. So they're not as good, but they work. They still work. And, and this is an interesting thing too with microfit. Towards the end of the microfit, we actually looked for roofs that faced east and west. We didn't want south facing roofs. And the reason for that was that we were limited by how much power we could generate at any one time. So we wanted to generate power first thing in the morning. As soon as the sun comes up in the east, we wanted to have our panels powered up, and we wanted them powered up all the way till the evening. So instead of having a big peak in the middle of the day, we would have two peaks that are separated by 3 or 4 hours. So no, you don't have to have them facing south. It's better if they are facing south. But
and do they rotate? They don't rotate. They're stationary.
If they're on the roof, that they're stationary.
Okay.
So once again, when panels were really expensive, we did dual axis trackers. So they'd follow the sun all day long.
Yeah, I feel like that's in movies and stuff when it first started coming out, right? I don't know. My husband would think of which movie it was, but there'd be scenes where the solar movies would, I don't know, Star Trek, something like that. But now I can see that they don't need to move. That's interesting. Okay.
So, go ahead, Rick.
No, you go ahead.
Well, yeah. So I was saying, as panels became cheaper, we didn't bother putting them on dual axis trackers anymore. We would face half the panels east, we'd face half the panels west, and not have any movement. And that way we don't have any motors and actuators and all the other stuff that can go wrong with those. So the dual axis trackers are still around, but that's because they were installed at a time when panels were probably 5 times more expensive than they are now.
Wow. So that's good. So that's coming down. So that must be good. As far as that goes. Do you see a trend? I mean, I know with all the condos, let's say in downtown Toronto, a lot of them are required to have, let's say, green roofs, like, actual gardens up top. And, do you see some future where there's a requirement to have some solar? I mean, I know it would mean a lot to, do a whole condo building, but do you see?
Well, there are some jurisdictions in the U.S. where, and certainly in Europe, where you're required to have solar. Any new homes are required to have a certain amount of solar, not just condominiums. So there are requirements that way. And even in the building code in Ontario, they altered it to say that all houses had to be solar ready. So you had to have a conduit that went from the roof to the basement. So I think in the future, I think if we want to meet the targets that have been set out, I think they're going to have to do that. They're going to have a requirement that a certain amount of solar goes on a roof, or there's some kind of penalty if you don't have it. So.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So we've got a couple more listener questions. Joanne has written in. Someone told me that told me if I generate residual electricity on my system, I could sell it back to the power company. Is that true? And if so, how does that work?
Well,
yeah, so we talked about that at the beginning of the show, right? So that was the old microfit.
Yeah, that time has passed, unfortunately. I still get people calling me about that to say, I've got this field and I want to install, solar panels in it. And well, unfortunately, that time has passed. We can't do that anymore. They allow you to store the power for up to 12 months. If you generate more power than you use, then it gets given to the grid for free. You sacrifice it, so you forfeit it. So we don't want to do it too big.
Thanks for that question, Joanne. So
yeah, thank you, Joanne. Cindy has also written in. Cindy says, hello. My husband and I have been contemplating going solar for several years, especially with many uncertain times now in this world. However, we have a beautiful cedar roof on our home that we spent thousands of dollars on, and we would not want any type of solar equipment mounted on our roof to ruin its cedar appearance. My question to you is, do you have or offer any panels that are ground or pole based? And if so, are they just as good as roof mounted systems? Thank you very much for your answer, Cindy.
So yeah, we've installed a lot of ground-based systems, and they were pole-mounted for a while. We certainly do have pole-mounted options, and we have rack-mounted options to go on the ground. They're better in some respects in that you can put them where the sun is. You can like if your house is shaded, you can't really move your house. But when it comes to solar arrays on the ground, we just move the array to where the sun is. We can also orient them better to the sun. The disadvantage is they're more expensive because we have to put foundations in the ground. We have to build a structure. With a roof mounted system, we're just anchoring to the existing structure, so we don't have to worry about that. So going on the ground is more expensive, and they've changed the rules. They change the rules every year, it seems like, because every time you think you know the rules, they come along with something different. But they changed the rules a little while ago to say they don't want them on the ground anymore. They don't completely outlaw them, but there's a bunch of provisions in there that make it difficult to mount them on the ground nowadays. I'm not
Who's
saying it
they?
can't be
Like the
done.
government?
The government, yeah, the government. So it used to be the OPA, now it's the ISO that looks after it, and they changed the regulations. Now they still allow it if you get permission from the local planning board. As I say, there's a couple ways to stick handle around that, so it can still be done. And off grid, it can definitely be done because off grid, we don't have to get anyone's permission to do anything.
Yeah.
So yes, there are solutions. You just need a place to put them. So typically, if you're in a town or if you have a small lot, it's going to be hard to put them on the ground because it does take up a lot of area. If you're in a rural setting, then yeah, certainly, it would make more sense than on farms and stuff like that. Because once again, we're still talking about 33 panels. They're a meter wide, so you're looking at, if you put them double up, you're still looking at 15 meters wide. So it does take up a bit of area. So if you have the room, then yeah, it's still possible to do that. Sure.
Okay.
James,
I was going to say the other advantage of that too is that you can actually clear the snow off. So when they're on a 2-story roof, it's just not safe to clear the snow off. But if they're down on the ground, then it's easy to do that. So.
Okay. And what percentage of power loss if they're generating electricity in the winter? Is there a percentage of the snow blocks or you lose to the presence of the snow on the panel?
You lose a lot. Because if you think of, when you have snow in your skylight, there's not a lot of sun coming through.
Right.
So, if you have an inch of snow on there, you're probably going to cut your production in half. If you've got 4 inches, you're going to cut it to almost zero.
Okay.
Now, in the wintertime, though, there are some advantages of the wintertime too, though, because panels are electronics, and like most electronics, they work better in the cold. So for a solar panel, for every degree Celsius they're colder, we get an extra 0.5% efficiency. So when it's minus 20 out, they're running at 20% more efficiency. So a 200-watt panel would be putting out 240 watts. So the cold is actually good for panels. Also in the winter, we get drier air. So humidity in the air blocks solar radiation. So in the wintertime, when you get these dry, crisp, cold days, that's, the perfect solar irradiation conditions. So there are some advantages. And also if you have them on the ground, you get the reflection off the snow too. So you're getting double the sun on your panels. So if you get a good day in the wintertime, they can generate a lot of power. Just the days are short, that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, James has written in, and I think we spoke to this a little bit, but James says cost. A lot of folks say the cost to install one of the systems is not worth the cost of the savings. It just has a feel-good political issue for environmentalists. When could James expect some kind of decent return on an investment for a home system?
Well, that's, once again, it's going to depend on where you are. If you're calling from British Columbia, then it's going to be a little more difficult because hydro is cheap in British Columbia. Here in Ontario, it's fairly expensive. Although, as we mentioned before, the Ontario Fair Hydro Act is subsidizing our bills. So when the subsidies go away, which one day they'll have to, I think then you're going to see returns that are going to be in the 10 to 12% range. Today, if you look at it today, let's say the system that costs, let's say $30,000, your cost of capital on $30,000 at today's interest rates is only $600 a year, and you're saving $1,500 a year. So, the math, it depends on how you want to do your math. And one of the challenges we have with net metering when we look at return on investment is we don't know what the future price of energy is going to be. We can all generally count this on it's going to be more, When we were doing microfit, we knew exactly how much someone was going to get for the next 20 years. We knew we could count on exactly what you're going to be paid and how much you're going to be. So it was easy to calculate return on investment. With net metering, it's a lot more difficult because we don't know what the government's going to do with the rates. If we looked at the rates prior to the Ontario Fair Hydro Act, we were seeing increases of 11% year over year for 15 years. So the inflation rate for energy was very high. Then of course the Ontario Fair Hydro Act kind of screwed all that up for us. But so they are cost effective today. You're not going to see the 10% return on investment you saw before, but they're cost effective today. So I'm not sure what numbers the caller is looking for, but you can generate 100% of your energy from solar. You can get the feel good effect. It's not going to cost you anything. You're going to have an upfront cost, but you're going to have a savings that goes on forever. So depends on how you want to do your math.
That's right. And like you said, the rates are never going to go down. They're going to go up. So the investment now, could really pay going forward.
Yeah, and that the Ontario Fair Hydro Act is it's something that's costing us billions and billions of dollars a year, and at some point we're going to have to pay that back.
Yeah.
So I think at some point, we're going to have to in order just to pay the true cost of energy, they're going to have to raise the rates by 40% from where they are today, and that'll be a shock for people, I know. But then on top of that, they're going to have to pay that money back. And my best guess would be they come up with a debt charge like we had before. We had a debt repayment charge for 20 years. We're going to have that again, I think. So in the future, when the Ontario Fair Hydro Act goes away, it's going to change the rates dramatically. And it's going to change the return on investment dramatically.
Well, I think we've had a great show so far, and I know I have. I hope a lot of other people have learned a lot about solar. As we get to the last 10 minutes, I've got a question for you, and Dawn has actually just got in here too. Hello, unfortunately, I just tuned in. Does the guest have a web presence that I can go to? Also, will you be rebroadcasting the show somewhere online so that you can listen to it? And definitely, Dawn, you can get in touch with Ray and check out Solar Direct Canada at solardirectcanada.com. And as always, Dawn, we post all of our live radio shows on all of your favorite podcast providers. So all you have to do is go on to your favorite podcast provider and search Down the Garden Path podcast, and you'll find tonight's show posted later in the week, as well as years of great content related to gardening and other information as well.
And if you don't do podcasts, you can also go to either of our websites, right? So my website at downtoearth.ca with the number 2. I post every week under my podcast there. You'll see the link to the show. So that's if you want to listen, because sometimes people want to listen. I know I listen at my desk on the computer sometimes versus on my phone. So it's good to know that you can find the show on our websites as well. And Matt, your website?
Yeah, exactly. And you can find it on my website at naturalaffinitydesigns.ca. So just before we wrap up, Ray, Joanne, did you have any other questions?
No, I think I asked a lot, and our listeners asked a lot of good questions too. So I learned a lot today.
They did, and so did I. I just had the question for Ray. Ray, is there any new innovation in the industry in solar power, technology, maybe regulations or something that's changing that you're looking forward to, that is exciting you about the future of solar power?
Well, I think there's efficiencies, new efficiencies in panels that come along every day, but that's a very incremental thing. I think what's exciting in if you look at how solar is doing globally and some of the projects that are on the books now, there's a project called Sun Cable, which is just kind of blew me away. That this is the city-state of Singapore that wanted to do solar, and they didn't have the area to do it. So they came up with a very innovative idea that they'll put their solar array in Australia and put a 4,000 kilometer cable under the water and power the 20% of the country from Australia. And I thought that just blew me away, because you can imagine if they wanted to do that for Europe, they can come across the Mediterranean to the North Africa where land is basically useless anyway, and they have sun all the time, and they could power all of Europe that way. So it's there's some amazing projects that are coming along, and every time when someone announces the world's largest solar array, that's only there for a month, because a month later someone else announces one bigger. So globally, solar is doing wonderful. Locally, we have some challenges with regulations, but globally, there's some amazing things that are going on that just eye-opening what can be done with the future.
Because thinking about when we were speaking before the show, I'm talking about the benefits of Las Vegas or Nevada and Arizona, that they could produce more than they could possibly ever use, but then could they not sell it to south of them where they're not getting as much, they're not getting as much sun, like Minnesota, so Nevada's now supplying Minnesota kind of thing. Like
absolutely,
nobody's seeing it as that, like as a benefit of something you can sell like oil.
Well, I think, as I say, this one with Singapore, that was eye-opening, that they could make that make sense financially. They could put 3,700 kilometers, I think, of submarine cable to power, from Australia. That wow, that's the and like you said, you could have you could have an array in Nevada or someplace in the desert where the land is basically useless anyway, and power the whole country. If they wanted to do it, it's just a matter of politics.
Yeah. Well,
Sorry about that.
I know.
That's okay. Joanne's goes off all the time. No.
Yeah, thanks.
I turned my cell phone off, but that one's still off.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ray. This was very informative, and I think it ties in. I'm sorry we didn't get you as early in October, but I think it fits, and I think it's going to be a popular show on our podcast.
Great. Well, thanks for having me in. And I'm always looking for an opportunity to talk about solar. So great.
Yeah, excellent. And for our listeners, you can always reach out to us anytime. You can find me, Joanne Shaw, at downtoearth.ca is my website, and all my social media links are there. So you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And we also have a Facebook group as well. So Down the Garden Path podcast Facebook group. We would love to have some more people tune in there and chat with us. And Matt, our listeners can find you.
That's right. You can find me, Matthew Dressing, at naturalaffinitydesigns.ca with all my social media links there as well. And then just to echo you, Joanne, definitely, you know what, we're available and we love interacting with all of our listeners. Find us at Down the Garden Path Podcast on Facebook. Continue the conversation. Share us your success stories, where you're listening from. Send us pictures of your gardens and your design dilemmas. And we'd love to share and interact and help you in any way we can there, for sure.
That's right. And next week it's the first Monday of December.
The first Monday of December. And you know what? We are going to be doing one show as we go into our holiday season. So we are going to come back next week, December 7th. And we're going to talk about the lessons from 2020, a look back at 2020 in the garden and all the craziness that's gone on then.
Yeah.
So definitely tune into there. Say Merry Christmas as we say goodbye to the live shows for the year. But the next week, we will have a repeat for holiday plants and care as well. So definitely tune in. And again, don't forget to search Down the Garden Path podcast on your favorite podcast app and visit our websites again to catch up on all the wonderful content that we love putting together for all of our listeners.
That's right.
I was just going to say thank you to everybody for tuning in. Did you want to throw anything else?
No, you go ahead. Read our names, list our names, and say goodbye to them. And thank you.
Alrighty. So Bart, Janice, Bonnie, Frank, Carla, Gwen, Joanne, Cindy, and James, thank you very much for sending in your questions about solar power to Ray and driving the conversation. And thank you everybody again for tuning in every Monday and spending your Monday night with us.
That's right. And thank you again, Ray, for joining us. And we're glad this was really informative. So I think it's been a great show. And we thank you. And Gary, thank you for once again producing the show
are
here on Reality
welcome.
Radio 101.
Very nice.
We want to say goodnight to everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Down the Garden Path with your hosts Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101.